Know-it-alls rarely know it all. A story was shared about a large congregation that had Wednesday night dinners in their gymnasium. And what they would do to protect the floor would lay out these large blue tarps to protect it. But with a blue tarp, there's always an edge. And the staff that was facilitating the Wednesday night buffet was always worried that some visitor, some guest, some member would trip over the edge of a blue tarp laid on the floor. Well, sure enough, the inevitable happened, and it was an elderly lady that was walking across and misstepped and tripped right over the edge of a blue tarp, and food went sailing across the room, the clatter of plates, the sheer silence of everyone suddenly turning and responding, and there were people that rushed to her side quickly, including medical professionals. There were actually 5 doctors at this Wednesday night gathering, and this should be a good thing that 5 medical professionals are available to help. But it didn't take long for them to recognize the limits of their medical abilities. You see, all 5 doctors were ophthalmologists, eye doctors. So they didn't know much at all about sprains or bone breakages or any kind of issue with a fall. They knew everything possible about the eye. But like all good gatherings seem to have, there is someone in the midst. It was a young man who had graduated high school a few years back and decided to skip college and instead become an emergency medical technician. And he was right there, right ready, and the lady fortunately did not have serious injury. But the ophthalmologist, at least one of them, had to quip, well, I wasn't sure if she was injured at all, but her eyes looked pretty good. Oftentimes, wisdom is in the eye of the beholder, and knowledge is sometimes not as helpful as we think it might be. Where shall wisdom be found? Where do we find that practical ability to make our way wisely through the world? We live in a time and place in history where we can just Google it, making Google a verb. Or oftentimes when our children ask, why don't you just look it up on your phone? Everything is answerable on the phone. And yet we find ourselves in the 21st century drowning in all sorts of information, yet starving for knowledge. And as our ophthalmologists reveal, knowledge itself has some limitations to it. Your specialist or educational level of expertise may be completely useless in circumstance or situation. A medieval English major is not going to do very well with surgery. There are some people with the most advanced educational attainments and certifications possible, and yet they struggle in the mundane, ordinary, my mother would say, common sense things of life that are beyond their field of expertise. Now, this isn't to say that knowledge and obtaining education is not a worthwhile endeavor. Indeed, it minimizes the possibilities of terrible accidents that could be completely avoided if one knew better. More often than not, it's arrogance than ignorance that causes most of the heartache in the world. We rarely use the word wisdom in our day-to-day language. We may call someone wise, and usually we give wisdom and wise to those who are full of wisdom, maybe, and they are perhaps standing in for advice, a respected member of the community, usually a person with many years of experience. It may stand in for advice, which may be good, may be poor, may be unchanging, or it might be just guidance and skills to teach us. Someone once examined the progress of mission statements that colleges in America made over the last 20th century and found that at the turn of the century, promising students, prospective students of the colleges were told that if they came to that particular American college or schedule or school, they would eventually acquire wisdom. Now, about mid-century, about the 1940s to the 1960s, the college mission statements changed a little, and they were a little less bold in their claims. They only said that they were places that dispensed knowledge. And by the end of the century, at the dawn of the 21st, colleges had scaled their prospective student mission even more, now promising to give aspiring students information. Now, I'm afraid that as we have gone from wisdom to knowledge to information, that the next thing that a college mission statement will tell aspiring students is that they provide and contain and disseminate data. And it's up to you to figure out what it means. As we have seen so often in this COVID pandemic, statistics are whatever you want them to mean. And more often than not, they can be spun to whatever presumptions, assumptions, and biases you want. As Mark Twain and perhaps others are quoted as saying, there are three kinds of lies in the world: lies, damned lies, and statistics. Our scripture reading today is part of a long address about wisdom that is being passed between a father to a son. Again, unfortunately, stereotypes of the culture and age in which Proverbs was written some 3,000 years ago fall into play here. Patriarchy reigns supreme. In fact, the first 9 chapters of Proverbs are nothing more than these addresses, at least 12 of them by someone's count, that encourage a young man to seek Lady Wisdom rather than Lady Folly. Lady Wisdom being virtuous, Lady Folly being a lady on the street, provocatively enticing the folly of her ways. And Lady Wisdom cries in the street. Not only does she cry in the street, this is not a passive approach that can be taken at one's own discretion, but rather she's a teacher that is active and passionate and resourceful in seeking out students where students would be in most times and places, in those 2 dominant public spheres of an ancient Israelite city: the public market where commerce happens, and the city gates where legal issues are settled and decided. In both commerce and law, wisdom is there among the people, not privatized, but near and available to all. Our pronouns move really quickly in this passage of Proverbs. They move quickly from you, meaning you, second person, to they. And wisdom seems to build in her frustrations with the stupid and avoidable consequences of those who decide they're done, who refuse to heed or indeed remain simple, and have concluded that there's nothing more to hear and start to scoff and mock her teachings, removing themselves from learning any further than what they've already gained. And perhaps you know someone who's a know-it-all. Perhaps you know someone who says, I'm done. I know everything there is to know about God, religion, church, my faith, and I don't even need to show up anymore. I'm good. I know the password to heaven. But wisdom warns those who mock her that there is a point of no return where she will not offer answers anymore. It will be too late for any lessons or discernment, and one will have to face the consequences of their arrogant ignorance. Proverbs illustrates life as an either-or scenario most of the time, that this happens because of that. But we know that life doesn't always work in this either-or neat arrangement between wise things and good things and dumb things and foolish things corresponding with one another. No, life seems to happen at times haphazardly. Now, I would say that Proverbs gives us a reliable guide, but not a foolproof one. Sometimes good things do happen to foolish people, and sometimes very wise people suffer unimagined consequences in spite of their wisdom in life. It is better to gain the education and experience for the common issues that face us in life. But Proverbs may be more a case of the majority of the time this works rather than this always works. Many bad things in life truly are our fault, following into our own foolishness. I find it telling that wisdom is in the streets, that wisdom can be gained and heard, but it has to be heard in order to be heeded. Are you heeding wisdom's call in the streets of your life? She's not hiding away. She's not stuck in a library. She's not even entirely, exclusively in a school or a place of educational learning. She's always found when people gathered. She can be discovered among conversation. She can whisper through discussion. Are you in groups that challenge what you thought? Confront what you believe that you may not have questioned before. Asks you to examine life again. Now, this is not foolproof. You can have a whole bunch of fools gather together and think they're wise just as easily. We see this in the telling situation of conspiracy theories, whether it's moon landings or assassinations or truthers or flat earth societies that boldly claim, ironically, that they have members around the world. But oftentimes the relentless pursuit of research on your own terms in the name of truth that contradicts accepted institutional wisdom or consensus is a dangerous and often destructive way to play the game. Wisdom does not live well in isolation, and often wisdom cannot be found all alone, just waiting to be discovered by a truther. And certainly wisdom can never be found when you are at the point that you scoff, mock, and ignore her calling in the streets. When you feel you don't need to learn anymore, you shut down. And it might require a re-examination, because more often than not, we are pulled more by the comforting lies we love than the truth that reveals them as lies. Some of the most dangerous thoughts and deeds in the world began with an unquestioned presumption. Wisdom requires not conclusions in the conversation, but curiosity that opens our minds and connects them with others into the larger story of human life together. We gain from one another by gathering. We don't gain much at all when we gather unto our own group that already agrees with us. The gaining of wisdom means sustaining that openness, sustaining that opportunity of growth and change, widening the boundaries of our world so that God's Spirit may continue to mold us and shape us into the persons God created us to be in the first place. He gave us wisdom that we may become wise. A wise person recognizes that they can never, ever claim to know it all by themselves. They cannot announce boldly that they've graduated, they've been promoted. There is nothing more to learn here. Only by keeping our minds open, our hearts connected to God, and our lives ready to see possibilities around us, and being ready to adapt and to grow, can we possibly find what wisdom promises us in the end: security and a life of ease. Knowledge for its own sake has limited value. It must be applied in order to be useful, and only sharing our knowledge can make wisdom revealed. A good life comes from those who continue to be on the journey, to train, to learn, to seek God, and to love others as God already loves them. Our actions and our decisions and our deeds do have consequences of one sort or another. And as we are acting, deciding, and doing, we are being formed, sometimes subtly, into a certain sort of person who lives in the world a certain way. What way are you becoming so certain about? When one approaches the end of one's life, will we say that our lives can clearly be seen as filled safely in the manner that shows that we sought wisdom? Or how often we shut wisdom out to pursue our own destructive foolishness? Thanks be to an all-wise God who seeks us out, that we too may be wise. Amen.